Welcome to ASNA's Introducing Wings video series. In this short video, we'll show you how to modernize an RPG application with ASNA Wings in a matter of minutes. This is a hands-on video. We'll show you from beginning to end the basic steps required to modernize your RPG applications. This video gives you the view from the keyboard of how to use Wings. This video assumes that you know basically what Wings is. Wings' core concepts and a summary technical explanation are provided in the first video in the Introducing Wings video series, Introducing ASNA Wings. That video and others in the series can be found at tinyurl.com/wingsvideos. To use Wings to modernize an RPG application, you'll need an IBM I running v6r1 or higher with IBM's Open Access and the ASNA Wings Open Access Handler installed. You'll also need the ILE RPG program to modernize, including its RPG and display file DDS source. You'll need a Windows PC running either XP, Vista, or Windows 7 with Visual Studio 2010 and the Wings Screen Design Aid installed. Note that for this purpose, you will not need a web server. Visual Studio provides its own built-in web server. We'll discuss the need for web servers in the deployment video. Wings works with any of the commercial versions of Visual Studio 2010 from Professional and up. You can also use the Microsoft Visual Studio 2010 integrated shell as a free alternative. The integrated shell is a free download from Microsoft. It provides a light version of Visual Studio. The integrated shell can be downloaded at tinyurl.com/vsshell. Let's take a quick look at the application we're going to modernize. Its first display is shown here. This is a typical work with panel. It has an option 2 here, and if we take that option 2, that will let us add or update a customer record. Both this panel and the previous panel are made up of record formats from the same display file. Let's return back to the work with panel. Now we'll do option 11. This lets us take a look at order information. Now when we get to this panel, it's made up of record formats from a second display file, and we've actually called a different RPG program. On the left is the cust DSPF display file used by RPG program Cust Inc. There's the two panels with the record formats in it that are built from Cust DSPF. Then on the right is the ORD-H DSPF display file used by ORD-H Inc. We're going to modernize the display file on the left. We are not going to modernize ORD-H DSPF. We're going to do this so that we can show how Wings renders the modernized display files, but also uses its built-in 5250 emulator to render panels that haven't been modernized. Now, because we want to modernize the cust DSPF display file, we need to add the Wings Open Access Handler to Cust Inc., the RPG program that uses that display file. So to do so, we'll add the continuation line shown below to the workstation file declaration and then recompile the program. Another Wings video shows some recommended strategies for managing program objects that use the Wings Open Access Handler. These strategies would provide an environment where your users could use either a copy of the program using the Wings display file or a copy of the program using the traditional display file. Now we're ready to see Wings in action. Now let's turn our attention to using the ASNA Wings Screen Design Aid to modernize an RPG application. The ASNA Wings Screen Design Aid is hosted inside Visual Studio 2010. That's what we're looking at here. We'll use Visual Studio and the Wings Screen Design Aid to create the ASP.NET web application that provides the new presentation layer for your RPG applications. Then into this application, we're going to import display files from your existing green screen DDS. We'll start by creating a new website, File, New, Website. And you'll notice, first of all, there are 3 languages up here in the upper left-hand corner: Visual Basic, C#, and Visual RPG. Now you won't use any of these languages initially with ASNA Wings. In fact, you won't write any code initially with ASNA Wings. We modernize display files without needing to write any code. But later you might want to write additional code at the presentation layer to extend and enhance that presentation layer with things such as graph controls, Google Maps, business partner web services, things like that. I'm going to come down here and select ASNA Visual RPG. I'm going to get the Wings 5.2 template, and I'm going to give this a name, give this project a name. Now I'm going to call it Wings Demo for Video. Press the Enter key. What Visual Studio is going to do is stub in the skeleton of a website application for us, but tailored for the Wings use. If we come up here and say View Solution Explorer, we'll see the Solution Explorer on the right there in Visual Studio by default. This is effectively the dashboard for Visual Studio. This is where you go to look at the contents of your project, to navigate your project, and to work with the various pieces. Now, we don't need to worry too much about all of these various components in this video. The thing we're most interested in here is the Views folder. That's right here. The Views folder is where Wings looks by default for the imported display files. So we're going to import a display file into that Views folder. I'm going to right-click that Views folder, and that pops up this dialog here. You'll notice that it has three options that Wings Screen Design Aid brings along with it: Export to Display File, Import Display File from DDS, and Import Message File. Now we'll talk about this Export Display File and Import Message File in another Wings video. We're here to talk about this option, Import Display File from DDS. I'm going to click that. It pops up the Import from DDS dialog. Over here on the left, you can see that we can enter our login credentials directly, or you can notice on the right here, we can also use an ASNA Datagate database name. Wings can use either a database name or direct credentials. Existing ASNA customers know that database names encapsulate login credentials into a named entity. Typically, we don't use database names with Wings. We just use the credentials directly. So that's what I'm going to do here. But you could use a database name if you had one. The IBMI that we're going to connect to is Cypress. The user ID is student0. I'll put in student0's password. We connect to the IBMI over TCP/IP port 5102. In these three text boxes here, it wants to know the library, source physical file, and member name of the DDS we want to import. We could either enter them directly or click the ellipsis and get a little pick list where with the pick list over on the left you see the library name. On the right you see the source physical file. We can come up here and pick the display file we want. We want cusDSPF. Now below that then there's some additional information. This long text box wants a space delimited set of library names for the library list for a field reference file if one is in play. We're not using one for this application. This drop-down would let us override our initial language choice for any one display file that we're importing. Typically you leave it what you selected initially, but you could change it. The web page name defaults to be the same name as the display file. That's typically the best practice. We're going to leave it the same. And then finally, we need to provide a namespace. This is a .NET partitioning scheme for the application. Typically, you would put your company name in there. I'm going to leave it at My Wings Web App. Now we'll click OK. We connect to the IBMI, and in a matter of moments, we now have imported cusDSPF into this Wings website. Now here it is. We can see it under the Views folder. So if we right-click and take a look at it, here's the design time view of that imported display file. Wings imports display files on a per display file basis, so this ASPX page is going to include all of the formats in the cusDSPF display file.
Let's scroll down to the Add Update panel. This is what we looked at in the PowerPoint a moment ago. And you can see that Wings has done its best to faithfully reproduce that user interface that it read from the green screen DDS. You'll notice that there are some details to tend to. That alignment could be a little better with these prompt values over here, but otherwise the fidelity is pretty great. Now let's talk about another thing that Wings does with quite a great deal of fidelity, and that is implement the RPG DDS model. If we select this input field, press F4, that shows us that input field's properties. You'll notice that it has a position cursor property, and that the cursor is to be positioned at this field if indicator 40 is on. So Wings faithfully replicates that logic that was otherwise being done by your RPG program to integrate that display file data with the user interface. Wings takes care of those kinds of operations for us. Now we're almost ready to run it. We need to tell Visual Studio what page is the start page when we run this application. Now remember that we don't need to have available a web server at this point. Later, when we deploy this application for production, we will need a web server. We don't need one right now because Visual Studio provides its own web server for us, a built-in web server. Now we've done everything we need to do. Let's run this application. We've only imported the one display file, cust.dspf. Now Visual Studio is going to compile the project. Now this takes several seconds. The time it takes to compile is compile time. So at runtime for your production applications, you will not experience this delay. Wings has finished compiling the project, and now it's bringing up the sign-on page. It's compiling that sign-on page right now. It will also take a moment, but this is compile time. Production time, you'll not experience this lag. Now there's the Wings sign-in display. You'll notice that it looks like a pretty typical 5250 sign-in. There is one difference, and that is that it's got the system and port up here at the top. Most Wings customers customize this panel and don't prompt for all of the data that you see here. In this case, we are prompting for all of that. Let's sign in. Cypress is our AS400 name, our IBM I name. 5102 is our port, student 0, and then IMWings is the program that we're going to call, residing in the RP H library. Another Wings video goes into a little more detail about what this program's doing, but essentially what it's doing is setting a library list and then calling the cust.inc program. Now I'm going to press enter. I could also click this button here. Either way, I'll go ahead and press enter. Now we do have a slight pause again because we've got a compile time issue where we need to compile that display file. ASP.NET compiles ASPX pages on the fly once. So you only experience this pause one time. Not one time per user, but one time altogether. Now we're looking at the Wings display of that original 5250 panel. If you go back and look at that screen in the PowerPoint, there's a high level of fidelity between this work with panel and that screen that we showed you in the PowerPoint previously. We can come down here and do an option 2. And there's our Add Update panel. Both of these operations are in the same program. Both of them are using formats out of cust.dspf. Now don't worry too much about the overall look and feel. In fact, I'm going to turn the look and feel off. What I want to bring your attention to is that part of the page right there. That blue rectangle represents the part of the Wings display that has the high level of fidelity with the original 5250 display. You'll notice that it's a virtual replication of what we saw on that 5250 screen. There's a few minor enhancements. So for example, we can see that Wings transformed what was a single input box into a drop-down using values from the values keyword in the DDS. But otherwise, it's very faithful. Now regarding the look and feel, that's what we get here. You have control over that look and feel, and you can literally make it look any way you want to. This is one of the default templates that Wings ships with. You could swap out the colors, swap out your company logo up there, and pretty much use this one. or you could customize it many different ways. The important point here is that the look and feel, once you create it, it gets replicated across all pages automatically for you. So you get a consistent look and feel. Now, we did not import the ORD-H display file, and that's the one we see when we do task 11. Let's do task 11. This is what's going to call the Wings built-in 5250 emulator. Here you can see that there is certainly a bit of a change going from the modernized display files to the 5250 emulator, but you'll notice that it's not a very dramatic speed bump, not a very dramatic difference. I'll press F12. We'll go back to a modernized display. Let's take a look at that again. Do an 11. Here's the modernized display. There's the 5250 emulator display. And in both cases, they work like the application does. So for example, if I were to press page down, we get a page down, see the data. So that in a nutshell is how you use ASNA Wings to import a display file from your IBM RPG application. There's certainly a lot of other topics to cover with respect to using Wings for modernizing RPG applications, and we cover those topics in other Wings videos.
As we've just seen, Wings is very quick and easy to use. It requires no upfront design and analysis. You just point and click to modernize your RPG UI. The output from Wings is standard ASP.NET ASPX pages. Ways to extend and enhance Wings display files are covered in another Wings video. Wings also offers flight plans, the ability to import many display files at once. This is also covered in another Wings video. For other videos in this series, please visit tinyurl.com/wingsvideos. Or please contact us at contactsales@asna.com or visit our website, asna.com. Thank you very much for your time. We greatly appreciate you watching this ASNA video.